Hey, Facebook family, happy hump day. Let me start off with the proper greeting and salutation. Happy hump day. Welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Live at 5, and going to do that thing that we do when I first come on, which is share this on my other Facebook pages. And would you guys do the same thing as you come on? Share this on your timeline so that others can see and hear what we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who don't know, I have a podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, that updates every Tuesday with new content. So if you haven't gone over to the platform of your choice, do so today and subscribe to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast. And share that with a friend. You'll find content on my podcast that's a little bit different from what I talk about here every Wednesday. But since I understand that not everybody is on every medium, I'm going to do a little repetition this week because there's a couple of stories. Hey, John. There's a couple of, hey, Barry. What's up, lunch buddy? There's a couple of things that I want to repeat. And so let me start off with my disclaimer. If I look a little funny, I have not had a stroke, but I did see the dentist today. And listen, I really need to quit scheduling these dentist appointments on Wednesday. I'm not paying attention to my calendar. You know, when you're fully retired like I am and every day is a weekend, I forget what day it is. And so I schedule stuff not knowing, what may be going on later in the afternoon. And so right now, again, my mouth is numb. I do believe that my dentist, although he is amazing and I love him dearly, I think he's trying to put his kids through college with just me alone. I've been going back quite a bit over these last few months. Certainly the last few months in December, because they realized that I had a little bit of money left over on my medical benefits, right? And so he wanted to get everything he could before that year ended, so we didn't leave any funds on the table. So I'm starting off this new year with more dental work, and at the end of the day, I can't complain because I get a lot of compliments on my amazing smile, and it's because of my dentist. So I'm going to go ahead and put his kids through college. But if I sound a little loopy, that's why. If I look a little funny, if one side of my mouth isn't moving, that's why. So let me start off by saying thank you, Barry, for an amazing lunch today. I met with one of my Facebook faithfuls who was here from New York, and we had an amazing lunch at one of my favorite places in Pasadena, Maria's Italian Kitchen. Chicken piccata is to die for. And it was just nice to be able to see someone that I interact with on Facebook face to face. And so you may see a picture of Barry and I having an amazing lunch today because I'm a foodie and the weight of my heart is through my stomach, y'all. So anyway, thanks, Barry. I enjoyed hanging out with you, and I'm sorry that we had to rush because I had to go put my dentist's children through college, but I appreciate you. So let me start off by saying that let me talk a little politics real quick. I know you guys have seen that arrest warrant that was served on Roger Stone last week, and I don't know if you've heard all of the belly aching that he's been putting forth about the manner in which they did this early morning raid. Folks who look like me, you guys, y'all seen that happen before, right? Police come to your house at the crack of dawn or just before dawn cracks and causes all kind of disturbance in the neighborhood and wakes up everybody and flash bangs and lots of cars and blocking traffic and all of that, right? I don't know why it is that, some folks like Roger Stone think that they should get, he was wondering why he didn't just get an invite to come turn himself in. Dude, really? And then to equate it to, it was worse they treated him worse than they did bin Laden. Now, I think there were some helicopters involved with that bin Laden takedown, so I don't know what he was talking about, but I get it. You know, he understands the media much like Lil Tink Tink does, and he's good at what he does. He may be a wingnut in other ways, but he's good at what he does, and so, you know, he may be looking to get a new dog because he said his dog is traumatized and he's under the bed. And, you know, they probably had a loss of consortium, you know, him and Mrs. Stone, right? Because the early morning radio all up. The thing that bothered him most was that he didn't have a chance to spray his face on, because the next day when he was talking on the news, I mean, he's worse than Lil Tink Tink with this shade of orange they got jumping off. I mean, this dude's whole face and neck was orange in an odd way. But what gave it away is that he didn't do his ears. And so I found myself not really hearing much of what he was saying, because I really wasn't interested in what he had to say, beyond the fact that he was outraged about the police coming to his house so early in the morning with so many folks. The orange face and the white ears, it just messed me all up. So I think that's what bothered him most, is that he didn't get to put his game face on. But nonetheless, I'm appreciating all of the foolishness that's going on in that three-ring circus that is this current administration. And so along with that, I got to talk just a little bit about Kamala, right? Kamala Harris, senator, has announced that she's running for president. And those of you who follow me on Facebook, you may have seen some articles that I've shared. And just know this, your agreement's not required, right? I'm not looking for concurrence. Everybody has an opinion about her and her chances. I mean, she's not even the nominee yet, so I'm really not interested in arguing with anybody about Kamala Harris right now. There's too many other people that are going to throw their hat in the ring for us to get all bent out of shape about whether or not she's going to be the next president of the United States. But I just shared a couple of articles because what I really want to do is encourage people, as in all things, to do your own homework. Don't trust, you know, what the TV says, what I say. Google is an amazing thing, and there is all sorts of information out there that is available and accessible. And even on some of my articles, you know, if I put the article up, y'all could at least read it. Don't be asking me what's in it. I'm giving you the link. I'm giving you the article. And if you want to do a comparison, then please Google her and her record and what she's been involved in, and then make a determination. I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. I'm just sharing information because I think information is good to have, right? So just know that. And I may share an article or two going forward. Your agreement is not required. I'm not looking for one. We can exchange pleasantries, if you will, but I'm not going to argue with you. And I really don't want you coming on my page arguing with anybody else, because there's been a couple of comments that I had to delete, because there's just some things that I'm just not going to tolerate on my page. You know, everybody who is on my page, you're on there because you have one. So if you really feel some kind of way, yeah, you might want to go to your page with that foolishness. Don't come on mine with it. You've been warned. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, the first story that I wanted to talk about was, it's a little dated now, but, you know, this was kind of a big deal. 2 police officers were playing a game of Russian roulette last week, allegedly. And, you know, I don't know if we'll ever get the true story on that. But anyway, this was 1 o'clock in the morning. 2 officers were on duty, and they went to the house of one of them, right? Shortly after they get there on duty, now they're supposed to be patrolling, but I get it, it's graveyard, and you guys know what's up when you work morning watch, right? You tend to handle those first few radio calls, and then you put your periscope up and you hide, right? So maybe that's what these young officers were doing. Periscope up, listening to the radio in case there's a call that comes out, and then this other female shows up. She's off duty, and then somehow they get engaged in a game of Russian roulette. Now, one of the officers who was on duty said when he saw the gunplay, the way the story is reported, he was like, dude, I'm out of here. So he got up and left. And on his way out the door, he heard a shot. And he turned around. And, of course, the female who was off duty had been injured and ultimately succumbed to those injuries. Now, the story has been evolving over the last couple of days, and then it just kind of got quiet. But, a young woman lost her life. She's only 24 years old, 2 years on the police department, and the officer involved, his name is Nathaniel Hendren, 29 years old, and evidently they're all friends. They all know one another, and they all have about the same amount of time on the job. So Nathaniel Hendren has turned himself in, and he's being charged now with murder. Young people, 29 is not real young, but, I don't know, guys, right? His 29-year-old brain was probably really like a 17-year-old. I don't know what made him think that was a good thing to do, and I wonder if that was even the first time that they had played Russian roulette with a handgun. But life-altering decision was made that night, and I would imagine with the time that he has on the job, that police department is going to have to do a punctious pilot on him. They're going to have to go ahead and make an example of him, and off to the cornfield he will go. I don't see how he's going to be able to keep his job. And even the other officer that was there, who wasn't involved in the gunplay, he's going to have some explaining to do too, because after all, he was out of his area. He was on duty. And, I don't know how involved and in-depth that internal affairs investigation is going to be, but he too may face some jeopardy with regards to that. So, didn't know if you heard that the officer who was involved had been named, Nathaniel Hendren, and he has turned himself in and has been charged. Okay, I want to talk about this. I got a story, but hey, Ed, I see your question. So you want to know what do I think about the Jussie Smollett alleged lynching situation? I don't know enough about it. I've heard what's been reported. I think there's more to the story that I need to know before I make an informed decision. I've seen some things come across my news feed that said that the officers were questioning his version of the story. But then I also saw something that said there was surveillance cameras nearby that may have some information that might be helpful in the investigation. Now, I don't know if that's information that substantiates the thought that he's not being honest or that he exaggerated the circumstances of the assault. So I'm going to hold judgment, and I'm going to wait until more is known about that assault. But what I will say is, assuming that what he said is true, we have to be ever vigilant. None of us are immune, and, he's a celebrity, he's high profile, if you will, and if someone would be brazen enough to attack him and try to put a rope around his neck, and I don't know how big of a guy he is, I don't know if size was an issue, but I think it was more than one assailant. So, this is the time that we live in, and for the next 2 years until we get this wingnut out of office, you just need to be mindful. And so, listen, and that's everywhere. That's at a movie theater, that's in a mall, that's everywhere we go. And not just black people, it's just people in general, because you got gun nuts out there that want to disrupt festivities. And so, you have to be mindful of where you are and have an escape hatch. And if somebody is coming up on you, he was out, I think, at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning is the way I understood it. If I'm out at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, don't know, Ed, if this was reportedly having occurred previously. Don't know. But if he was out at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm guessing there's not a whole lot of people out. Why are you walking up on me at 1 o'clock in the morning? I don't have nothing to say to you. I get real stupid when people come up to me in places where you ain't got no business coming up to me. Men, you understand this, right? Y'all don't talk at the urinal, right? I've heard that said, right? So I got a situation like that too. We don't talk at the ATM machine. We don't talk at the gas station. Say what you want, call me what you will. I don't have nothing to say to you when I'm pumping gas, and you don't have nothing to say to me. And I'm real clear. And so, I try my best to not become a victim by having, personal space boundaries that I just don't allow people to get into. And I try to pay attention. And so that's That's what we have to do. Yeah, Nia, 2 o'clock, and he was alone. So, I don't know. Had he been partying a little bit? Had he been drinking? Was he 100%? There's a whole lot of variables into how he could have been a potential victim. I don't know much about this young man. I'm sorry, don't judge me, but I don't watch whatever that show is he's on. Is it Empire? I don't know if it's Empire, Power. I don't know because I don't watch it. But I don't know how old he is either. And so, sometimes young people feel like they're invincible. And, you want to live life and you want to have a good time. But you got to be smart because these times are different. These times are different. And so, I don't advocate violence, but I do advocate, people having a right to defend themselves. And I'm going to just leave it at that because somebody come up on me at 2 o'clock in the morning. It'll probably only be one version about what happened. It'll be the one that I'll tell. Because I'm not going to allow you, if best I can, to get one up on me, right? All it takes is one good punch to render someone unconscious, whether you're a guy or a girl. And at that point, then a person can pretty much do whatever. Yeah, Ed, something like that. Then a person can do whatever they want to you. So I trust that he will have a complete and total recovery, and they will find what they need based on the reporting that there is surveillance from cameras somewhere in the area that shows people of interest. So more than one. So we'll wait and see. I don't know why he would make something up like that. I mean, that would be a career ender if they found that he was not honest. But I don't know enough about him, his personality, or the situation. I think they were filming in Chicago, and maybe that's why he was there to begin with. But anyway, I'm reserving judgment. I am very sensitive to victims of anything, and so I don't want to jump out and second guess someone who's been victimized. So that's that. So here's what I wanted to talk about. There is a police department in a suburb in Seattle, and it's called Lakewood PD. And if anybody is in the vicinity of Lakewood PD in that suburb in Seattle, yeah, you guys need to be extra careful because they got a whole lot going on over there. They just very recently, according to the Seattle Times, settled with the family of a Native American young man by the name of Daniel Covarrubias. Daniel Covarrubias was shot and killed, and they just settled his case a few months ago for $500,000. And what happened with the Daniel Covarrubias story is that he was acting erratic. He had gone into a medical facility earlier and was saying there were cameras in his eyes, and he wanted the medical people to help get him out, and somehow they let him go. I don't know why they would let him go if he was acting in that manner, but nonetheless he was. They did. And eventually he wound up someplace where someone else saw him acting erratic, called the police, and then the police came, and instead of showing a little patience, care, and concern for this man that was dealing with something, they shot and killed him. And so I talk on my podcast in a little more detail about the Daniel Covarrubias story. So you can certainly listen to my podcast. You can find it on my Facebook page. There's a link to it, and listen to that story. But I mentioned the Daniel Covarrubias story because there was something else that happened just the year prior. And some of these same officers are involved in these multiple stories, multiple settlements. And it's reported that this Lakewood Police Department has a history of racial profiling and bias over there. So you guys need to know that this is going on, and you need to be very, very careful. Hey, cousin, you need to be very careful in your dealings because these police officers, I believe, are still on the department. Certainly, the police chief, who was an assistant chief when one of these incidents occurred, and he was assistant chief and has since been promoted to police chief. So you understand, he ain't going nowhere, and evidently don't nobody find fault in the foolishness that he has overseen as the manager of that department. And that leads me to the story of Leonard Thomas. Now, Leonard Thomas settled, his family, because he's deceased, settled last year. And that settlement, same police department, same chief of police, was the largest in that state's history. The family was awarded $15 million. And what happened in the case of Leonard Thomas is that the city appealed it. And, this took some time. This has been going on, I think, since 2013 is when Leonard Thomas was first shot and killed. But the family was awarded $15 million. City appealed it. And then they were ultimately given $13 million, which was still substantial and the largest settlement in that particular town. And the officer that was involved in these shootings, Daniel Covarrubias anyway, is one of them is named David Butts. David Butts. Leonard Thomas was killed in kind of a hostage situation. I'll tell you real quick what happened. His mom had gone over to his house to pick up his son, and he and the mother got into it about something. His mom said he had been drinking and he had just lost a friend and he was a little despondent and he hadn't been taking his medication. So mom was concerned, and he either knocked a cell phone out of her hand or hit her. He did something that caused her to then call the police. How many times have we heard folks call the police because we're supposed to be the calming influence, if you will. We're there to keep the peace, restore order, and then you have a police officer come and exacerbate the situation, escalate the situation, and that's what happened. Officers arrived on scene. Leonard Thomas was on the front porch at some point with his little son. They did a flashbang, a distraction technique in the back of the house, and I guess it startled him or something. So he grabbed his son and he was going to take his son back in the house. And they shot and killed him, sniper, because there was kind of a hostage situation in their mind. He wasn't cooperating. He wasn't coming out at first. He wasn't responding to negotiators, and they had been dealing with him for quite some time. So once he stepped out and then was trying to go back in, this police chief, who was at that time an assistant chief, ordered the sniper to take him out. And the sniper did. The sniper did. So this family, took them to court, and they got a $13 million settlement. Again, I go into more detail on my podcast about that settlement, about the breakdown. And this one was kind of unique because in this instance, the officers that were involved, the police chief being one of them, the sniper, and another officer who was on scene was held financially responsible. They had to pay, I think the sergeant, one of them had to pay like $6 million punitive. Yeah, it was a big deal. So, I've always said that, officers will use a little more care and caution when it comes to taking a life. You better be sure if you're required to handle some of that civil settlement. And so of this $13 million that was given to the family, the officers were also charged and held for punitive damages. There's another story that was going on, and this one is in Houston PD. 5 officers were shot a couple of days ago. Many of you probably have seen something about it because of the threads that were circulating on social media. They were serving a serving some kind of warrant, and 5 Houston police officers were shot. The 5 officers were shot were Joe Gamaldi. Joe Gamaldi is the president of the Houston Police Officers Union, and he tweeted that 5 officers were shot, 3 were in stable condition, 2 were in critical condition. So not really sure what the status is right now on those officers, but certainly I'm keeping Houston PD in my prayers and thoughts as these officers try to recover from their injury. So, I talk all the time about, surviving police encounters from a citizen's perspective, right? Because obviously you guys want to get through it and you want to get home, but, police work is dangerous. And so, we want to get home too. And I don't know the particulars about what kind of warrant or who they were after, but, police work is tough and it's not for everybody. So, my hope is that that these officers will have a full recovery. On the same vein of the victimization of Jussie Smollett, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but you guys know who I'm talking about. I wanted to talk a little bit about things that we see on social media, and especially right now, because it seems like this election cycle is starting really, really early. And remember, you guys, there was a lot going on and a lot said and proven about stories that are circulated that look like they come from black folks, but don't, because there was a lot of Russian bots. We know this to be true. So I would just say and suggest, before you start sharing stuff and putting it up like it's gospel, make sure that, the website's not, player from the Himalaya.com or something silly. Would you just take a moment and look and see if this is a legitimate news service, and if it feels like it could be real? Again, all you got to do is Google the story and see if it's being reported by a reputable news agency to see if the story is true. Because again, sometimes, we're so quick to share stuff, and I know I get stuff. Folks are in my inbox all the time. Make this go viral, and I'm like, really? If you want it to go viral, why are you in my inbox? Put it on your page. So I try to be cognizant of the things that I put up, and I try to do my own due diligence before I share things with you. So I'm not saying I get it right all the time. I do the best that I can. Know that if you see something on my page, if I talk about it, chances are it's probably legitimate, as with the stories of Kamala Harris, right? Again, I know folks feel a certain way about that whole situation, but I shared things about Kamala because I wanted folks to know, and full disclosure, I have some history, if you will, with Kamala when she was here as an attorney general, and I'm not going to go into a long diatribe about that, but I do have some angst with her. I'm going to just say that, because when she was the AG and I was going through what I was going through with the Los Angeles Unified School District, I reached out to her and was like, hey, can you do something? And, Sister Girl sent me an email back and pointed in 7 different directions and told me 3 other agencies that I needed to talk to and not bother her with my foolishness. So I'm kind of cool with her, but that's just me. But what I wanted to talk about, because about a week or so ago, there was a lot going on about, this Atlanta date rape, or not a date rape, but this club rape in Atlanta. And then it just ended. Just like it started, there was a feverish tempo about this young woman who was allegedly raped in a club. And then there was something about she tried to commit suicide. And I don't know. I've been to her Facebook page, and maybe some of you have been as well. So I don't know if she did attempt suicide. I don't know if she was successful in that attempt. It was reported that maybe she was despondent because of some of the pushback that she was getting from people second-guessing her and questioning her motives and the veracity of her story about the alleged club rape that was put up on Facebook. And so what I want to say about that is not so much about her and her story, but just about internet gangsters and bullies, because it's a real thing. There was a little boy, 10 years old, who committed suicide last week because he was bullied. This 10-year-old kid was born with some kind of a disorder in Kentucky, is where he's from. He was born with some kind of a disorder that he had to wear a colostomy bag. And you know how mean kids can be. And the kids were just relentless in their teasing of him. And ultimately, last week, he hung himself. Now, I don't even know how a 10-year-old even knows how to hang themselves. I mean, this is the world that we live in, because I think about when I was 10 years old, hurting myself wasn't anything that was even remotely considered. But my point is, for anybody, whether you're this young woman who had the situation in the club and people are, coming at her and saying all sorts of things, or if you have a child who's being bullied in school, we need to have a conversation with our young people. We need to have a conversation with our loved ones about how much import we give on what other people think about us, right? because I know this to be true. People come after me all the time. You would be amazed at what people say to me in emails or what they tweet to me, how they find me. You know, when I started speaking out, I didn't know what to expect. I was just telling, my story because I had some stuff on my chest I needed to get off, right? But I knew there would be pushback. But, before I started speaking, when I would watch TV, I never saw anyone on TV who had an opinion about a thing that I wanted to find them and tell them. But people do. And, they come on my YouTube channel and they are not very nice. I'm a different kind of person, and I get that everybody is not me. I wish everybody was, because you've heard me say this before when people come on my page and they don't agree with something that I say, and my response is always, your agreement is not required. Your agreement is not required. And I would hope that these young people, because these millennials like to put way more of their business out on social media than my contemporaries do, for the most part. And so if you're one of these people who live by social media, I don't know what y'all did before social media, when you fell out with your boyfriend or, when things weren't going so good at the house. I don't know what you used to do before you got on Facebook with it. But if you're going to be on social media, if you're going to put yourself out there, then you really do need to have the mantra that someone's agreement is not required. Yeah, Kawana, people can be so mean, and especially these internet gangsters, because, they're hiding behind a silhouette, or they got some name that, you don't even know if it's them. And people will say all sorts of stuff. People can be so very, very cruel. I know, I remember a couple of years ago, I saw Leslie Jones, I think is her name, the black comedian female on Saturday Night Live. When she did that Ghostbusters movie, shortly after that, people were so mean and saying such horrible things about her physical appearance and whatever else, because they were haters, I guess, that she was about to shut down her Twitter account. And, I know I reached out to her, and I'm sure many others did as well, to, encourage her to not be bothered by what people say. And so I just feel really strongly about us making sure that we make sure that our young people are in a good place, and they're on social media in ways that we are not. And when someone comes for them, they need to be able to say to them, your agreement is not required. On to another story. I've talked to you before about what's going on in Baltimore. They're looking for a new commissioner. Yeah, Kawana, she was about to shut down her account. There's a new commissioner search going on in Baltimore. Remember, Mayor Pugh was looking at the police chief in Houston, and he had some stuff going on, and it was really weird, whatever was going on with him in his personal life, his professional life, as well as the selection process didn't really sit well with some of the people over there, I think on the city council in Baltimore. So he pulled his name from consideration, and now she's looking at someone else. I'm mentioning this to you because in the next few weeks in Baltimore, there are going to be opportunities for those of you who live there to attend some community meetings. They're going to be held at different locations around the city over the next several weeks, is the way it's reported. So if you want to make a difference in Baltimore, then you need to get involved and get engaged, and you need to pay attention to when these community meetings are going to be held, and you need to go, and you need to ask questions. And I hope I've said something in these weeks and months that you've heard me speak about police issues, that you would have a question or two that you might want to ask this prospective candidate for the position of police commissioner over there in Baltimore. And that's true of any other place where you may have an opportunity to ask someone who's ultimately going to lead your police department. One of the things that I would want to know is, how do you feel about an independent civilian review board? And if you don't have one, are you willing to create one? And will that civilian review board have teeth? In other words, will it have some power behind its recommendations when there is disciplinary action being adjudicated, because right now the police chief decides what kind of penalty an officer will receive in discipline. So, that's a big deal, right? Accountability. Does no good for a police department to acknowledge and admit wrongdoing on the part of their officers if there's no consequence. Hey, cousin, boy, 49ers King. I'm looking at you on my iPad, so it's kind of small, and I'm trying to read what folks are saying to me. If I miss it and it scrolls up, I'll come back and catch you when this live goes off. Yeah, so when you have an opportunity to talk to someone, do attend those meetings. Also, here in LA, February 7th, LAPD, I saw a flyer. LAPD is going to be hosting some type of a recruitment, because I was wondering when they were going to get around to trying to get some black folks on that police department again. Michael Moore talks a good game, but I'm not so much interested in what he says as I am in what he does. Oh, hey, Derek. Okay, I got you, cousin. Thanks. I appreciate that. Hey, cousin, share this on your timeline, and anyone else who's joining, please share this live feed on your timeline. LAPD is having a recruitment drive February 7th. Now, I saw a flyer that another one of my colleagues had put up, but it didn't say where. So for those of you that are here locally in Los Angeles, I'm assuming that it's going to be at the Police Academy in Westchester over on Manchester Boulevard. And if you don't know exactly where that is, Google it. Google it. If you have a real interest, call the city. Call the city and find out about that. Because, I always say that, change is going to come from within. And right now, there are so few blacks on LAPD that there are no ground pounders, like me. There's no street cops that are even in the feeder pool to promote up to higher ranks to be in a position to make a difference. And I know there's a couple of 2-3 blacks that are in positions of authority on the LAPD. I'm not really counting them right now. I don't want to say a whole lot about that, but anybody that has my book, I think it's chapter 8. I give a whole chapter to them, so you can check it out, and yeah. So, looking for somebody who's not afraid to speak truth to power, who's not afraid to speak up and speak out, who's not willing to go along to get along. Those are the kind of folks that we need on the police department. And so I encourage you to join LAPD or any other police department if you don't like when you see 2 white officers sit somebody who looks like me on the curb, or if you don't like being pulled over 6-7 times a month. Get on that police department so when a white boy tries to do that, you can ask him, what's our PC? What did this person do? What's this investigative stop you talking about? I need you to holler at me before we initiate this stop and turn on the red lights. You don't get to do that if you're not on the job. So, as I hear of more recruitment opportunities, I'll share that with you. I also heard and saw something from a local attorney who I'm friends with on Facebook and Twitter that he had attended a meeting last week with LAPD Police Chief Michael Moore, and he's going to be doing some outreach to the HBCUs. So I'm going to be doing some outreach to the HBCUs as well, because, listen, there's a process to getting on any police department, and you need to know those buzzwords. You need to know what they're going to be looking for. And having been a sergeant, a supervisor, and having participated in entry-level oral boards on the LAPD, I understand what kind of buzzwords you need to say when you're in those kinds of entry-level oral interviews. And so if Mike Moore is serious about reaching out to HBCUs, then I want to reach out to those students in advance of him and help prepare them, help mentor them, so that they can get on with LAPD or any other police department that they might want to join. I have another update on another story that I talked about some time ago. This involves a black police officer by the name of Muhammad Noor. You might know this story. He was in Philadelphia, I believe, on the same police department where the officer shot and killed Philando Castile. Muhammad Noor is a Somali immigrant. Now, he's a black officer who mistakenly, wrongfully shot and killed an Australian woman who had called the police because of some kind of situation. And then she came outside to meet the police, and Mohammed Noor shot her and killed her. And so, they'd had no problem charging Mohammed Noor. Now, listen, I'm not saying that, what he did was not wrong. I'm not saying that what he did shouldn't have a consequence. I'm just saying when you're black, they tend to want to charge you a whole lot more. And so in the case of Mohammed Noor, he's already been charged, but last December, the prosecutor decided to add some more serious charges to the things that they already had on his plate. So you understand that it's not looking real good for former officer Mohammed Noor. And the thing that kind of rubs me raw about that is, listen, this officer seemed like he probably should not have been on the job to begin with. But what rubs me raw is that when a police officer who's black gets involved in a situation, you don't see the FOP or the Benevolent Police Officers Association jumping to defend them as quickly and as full-throated as they do when it's a Philando Castile being shot by a white officer by the name of Geronimo Yanez. And Geronimo Yanez is still on that police department. So listen, I just think if, fraternal order police officers are going to be fair, and I know life's not fair, but, it should be across the board, right? Anyway, so that's the update on Mohammed Noor. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'll come back to you and report to you when I hear more about him. Well, yeah, Tony, Patterson, I hope I'm saying your name right, Tony. Yeah, they always say it's not about race, but, we know it is. And so, listen, I don't even need them to be honest about it because I've already made up my mind. I know and you know. And that's why I always say your agreement's not required. And we just need to handle our business, right? Because they're not going to do right. They're not going to admit wrongdoing. And so we need to be smarter and we need to use their system against them, right? If we sit around and wait for police chiefs to admit wrongdoing and admit that, their officers are racially profiling us, hold your breath for that. See what happens. That leads me to my next story because there was an article in the LA Times last week, and I know I got some LAPD family on here, and some of y'all might like this and some of you may not, but again, your agreement is not required because there was an article about Metropolitan Division. We call it Metro. The officers who work Metropolitan Division, it was described as an LAPD elite division, and I think it was elite back in the day. When I was a young police officer, I was in awe of officers who worked in Metro. I don't know. It seems like just anybody can get in Metro now. I don't know that it's so special, but what I do know about Metro is that, those are officers that are assigned to a platoon and they don't respond to radio calls. They're like a special tactical team that is dispatched whenever there's high crime or whenever there's a situation going on in a particular part of the city. Metropolitan officers are the ones that would respond, and then they are delegated solely to that situation. And so since they're not tied to a radio like I was in patrol, I had to see the man and see the woman, right? Probably dating myself, but OGs know what I mean, because a police radio would always say, 1 Adam 12, see the man, and then they would tell you what you need to see him about. Metro officers don't have to do that. Crime suppression. Thanks, Cheryl. Metro officers don't have to do that. They just respond to whatever. They are proactive. They're looking for stuff. They're elephant hunters is what I like to call them. And so there's been a study and an analysis done, and now the statistics are out that metropolitan officers are stopping a lot of black folks, stopping way more black folks than they are other people. And, who would be surprised, right? Did we really need a study and a survey and an article from the LA Times to tell us that that's what metropolitan officers do? And so we know that this is not going to change. And if you don't, I'm going to tell you why it's not going to change, because Mike Moore has already said that he's in support of what these officers do. Steve Soberoff, one of the commissioners on the Personnel Commission, which is our independent civilian review board, said he's in support of what the Metropolitan officers do. Now, Soberoff said, well, you know, I am kind of bothered by the numbers, but let's go with it. Let's go with it. I think we need more information before we do something. You got to study, you got to survey, you got statistics, and you need more information before you tell Metropolitan officers to quit stopping black officers to the extent that they are, because I always talk about LAPD having 2 police departments, one north of the Santa Monica Freeway, the more affluent areas, and the LAPD that is south of the Santa Monica Freeway, down in the hood, right? And I know this to be true because I worked both sides. I worked every bureau in the city, and the city is divided into 4 quadrants. I worked every bureau, and I know that officers conduct themselves differently over in West LA than they do when they're down in 77th Division. And so if an officer who's assigned to 77th Division one month finds himself transferred to West LA the next month, how is it that they get right? How is it that they're not stopping people for foolishness like they did when they were in 77th? Well, we know why that doesn't happen is because the people over there in those more affluent areas are not having it. And so what this study showed is that black drivers are stopped by Metro officers twice based on their population, 2 times more based on their population. Blacks make up about 9% of the city's population, yet they're stopped. The stops that Metropolitan officers make comprises 49% black. Blacks are 9% of the population, yet they make up 49% of the stops by Metropolitan Division officers. Converse that with white folks who make up 4% of the stops by Metropolitan officers, and they are 28% of the population. So, if you're black and you're driving around, don't be surprised if you get stopped. And so when you do get stopped, what I need you to do is I need you to comply and complain, right? Holding court curbside with any officer, but especially with a Metropolitan officer. And for my LAPD family, y'all know what's up, because, you know, they got a whole situation about them. And, yeah, you're going to lose that fight. So comply and complain. Hey, thanks, Fabian. I appreciate that. Is there anything else, since I can see actually what you guys are saying to me? Does anybody have any questions that you want me to address while I'm here right now? And if you do, just type it in real quick and I will respond to it. In the meantime, I want to remind you that I have an amazing book that is available for purchase through Amazon, and it's called Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. And in my book, I talk a lot about some of the things that I share here with you in terms of what I think you need to do to be safe and what I think you need to do to try to change this system. And I also talk about my experiences on the Los Angeles Police Department, the kinds of things that I went through, and I talk about it because I want to make it known for anyone else who may have an interest in becoming a law enforcement officer, because I often said I wished there would have been a class that talked honestly and truthfully about what to expect. We all understand, grown folks understand, that whether you're a police officer, you work in a hospital, or you work in a library, it's not a matter of if, but when somebody is going to come at you in a way that's inappropriate, disrespectful, is racially motivated. And so you need to know what to do in that instance. And so that is what I try to share with folks in my autobiography, Black and Blue. This is what I went through, and this is how I responded to it. So you understand that when I come to you and I tell you a thing, I'm not just telling you something because somebody handed me something on a piece of paper, or because I read something in a book. I'm telling you what I lived. Your thoughts on the lady that's running for president? I already talked about that, cousin. I I think it's too early to really form an opinion. She's not even the nominee. I mean, so why is everybody arguing about Kamala Harris? That's what I have to say about that. What I say is do your homework. Do your homework and formulate your own opinion. And, because, here's what I say about anything. My relationship with a person may not be your relationship with the person. And so I think it's patently unfair to judge someone based on someone else's interaction with them. This is true of my interactions on the police department. There are people that I worked for and with who I love to death. And if I were to say that name, James Tatro, love him to death, rest in peace, there are some folks that didn't really like Jim. But their relationship was very different. And so I encourage anybody, don't ask me what I think. Do your own research, do your own due diligence, and then formulate an opinion. We got a lot of months ahead of us. What I am concerned about is, and this is not necessarily with Kamala, but with anybody, I'm concerned that whoever we put forth needs to be a viable candidate. Because understand, if we don't put forth a viable candidate, we're going to wind up with another 4 years of, I don't know if Mike Pence is waiting in the wings. I'm hoping really that they will snare him up when they get a little tink-tink, because we know he got some splaining to do about that whole Mike Flynn and his son situation. So I'm hoping that he will get snared up in that. But nonetheless, if we don't have a viable candidate, somebody who could win for real, don't waste your vote like you did in 2016, y'all. Don't waste your vote. And I'm not saying that Kamala's a waste. I'm just saying whoever it is, don't waste your vote. If it's not somebody who could really win, we can't take another 4 years of another Republican. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I will see you, good people, next week. I'm going to be on the road. I'm taking off for Fort Myers, Florida this weekend. I will be speaking at Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, Florida. Excited to be there. I'm going to be taking my very dear friend, former mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, Omar Neal, with me, and good friend and colleague, Dr. Terrence Allen from Prairie View A&M, and we are going to we're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time at Florida, and we are going to we're going to share some things that are probably going to rub some folks the wrong way because their police officers have been mandated to attend. So I'm excited about that because they got to sit there and listen to me. And I know what it is to sit in in-service training when you're not really feeling it. And based on the demographics of Fort Myers, I'm already knowing they're not going to be feeling it. But nonetheless, they got to listen. And then once I tell them what I tell them, once you know, then you owe. Right, Omar? Once you know, then you owe. And so we're going to tell them, you know, how they should be conducting and comporting themselves when they stop people. We're going to talk to them about racial profiling and implicit bias. And we're going to talk to the young people there on the campus about what they need to do to survive those police encounters. And so I intend to be doing more of that. And I will find a way somehow next Wednesday, as I'm still traveling, to go live and just talk to you about what's going on with me. When I leave Fort Myers, just heads up, Dallas. Grandma's gone wild. She's out the house, and she's coming your way when I'm done with Florida. So for those of you that are in Dallas, and I've already reached out to a couple of folks that I'm going to hopefully have an opportunity to see and break bread with. But if you live in Dallas and you're going to be free next week, holla at a girl. Until then, you guys, be good and be safe.